And Jack joins us now in the studio along with Sandy Caligiore, who covered the 1980 Winter Olympic Games as well. Welcome. It's nice to have you both here.
Thanks
Good
for
to be
having
here.
us.
And so, Jack, you oversaw the audiovisual department.
Yes.
So you were taking care of the photographers, the television photographers, the still photographers for newspapers and magazines from across the country and around the world. So how many journalists and photographers did you have in that press center?
There were two press centers, one in the high school that was primarily for the still photographers. It was in the high school, which overlooks the speed skating oval, and some of the photographers would shoot the speed skating race out of the high school windows and then just hand their film into Kodak
They had the
right
lens
over
long
their shoulder.
enough,
Yes.
they could do that.
Let me tell you a funny story about that. He's not lying, because our press studio was on the third floor. We overtook the guidance counselor's office because, again, school is closed.
Yeah.
When we wanted to see a speed skating race, and of course, great interest in Eric Heiden, we go across the hall into the boys' room, third floor, raise the window, and we had a perfect view of the race.
That's incredible.
Speaking of the media, when it was announced that Lake Placid was going to get the Olympics, you remember this, the national media said, can't do it. They can't do it. It's too small a town.
Yeah.
They don't have the experience, don't have the facilities, and they were really down on Lake Placid hosting the Olympics.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, more records were broken at the Lake Placid Olympics than any other Olympics before, and up until what, Lillehammer?
Yeah.
Now, that speaks well for the facilities to break that many records,
Yeah.
and the organization.
And it helped to have Eric Heiden win 5 gold medals
sure.
and the Miracle on Ice.
Oh, yeah.
That silenced them,
Yeah.
too, to have such
Sure.
memorable moments.
Sure.
And ironically, all that success in terms of the events that Lake Placid had is what enabled the Winter Games to more or less explode, because in 84, 88, and then on, TV rights
Right.
started going through the roof. The interest in the Winter Games became much, much more than it was in Lake Placid and before. And in kind of a twisted sense, Lake Placid's success and then what has ensued since may have positioned Lake Placid out of a future games, because now it's so big.
I think ABC was the only one that bid on the Lake Placid Olympics.
Back then.
CBS and NBC didn't bid.
Now NBC has a lock on it, but everybody would love to carry the Olympics if they could.
Oh, sure, at this
but
point.
as you mentioned, it has grown so
Yeah.
much. Has it grown beyond Lake Placid's capability to host another Olympics, do you think?
Well, Jack may have his own opinion. In my view, for Lake Placid to host it in and of itself, it's gone beyond. I've been to 7 Winter Games, and I've seen what happened in Lake Placid, and 6 more games after that, and it's really gotten very, very big. But if Lake Placid partnered with somebody else,
That's my feeling.
and I've been a proponent of a Lake Placid Albany bid, which would be similar to Vancouver Whistler, about a 2.5-hour drive in between. It could be done, because you could put events between Albany and Lake Placid. You could have events at Gore Mountain, at West Mountain. You could go the other way and have events at Hunter and Wyndham. And then you could use what is innate to Lake Placid, the bobsled illusion skeleton, the ski jumping, the speed events in Alpine. You could have some hockey and figure skating, but it's gone to the point now where Lake Placid alone, it would be tough.
Would you like to see it with New York State, or I mean, there's always talk of a possible cross-border, the first cross-border with Canada, with Montreal, with Quebec City?
Well, there's never been a cross-border bid that's been accepted. So I would like to see it stay within the confines of the state. This governor has been very, very willing to invest in Lake Placid. Personally, I think they should have a dialogue with the U.S. Olympic Committee, because we have to remember that the city itself does not step forward and say, we want the Olympic Games. It has to start with the National Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
So if the USOC were to say, we want to bid on 2030 or 2034, now everybody else can get their ducks in a row, and Lake Placid could say, okay, that's what we needed to hear, and now we can move forward. But it's the NOC that's got to make that first move.
I have doubts about Albany handling it. I would rather see Montreal, who has a number of arenas, and Not only that, they've hosted an Olympics, 1996.
76.
76.
Or 76.
76 summer, yeah.
They hosted the Summer Olympics.
So the University Games coming in 2023 could be a run-through to see if Lake Placid would like to try another bid for another Olympics.
I think it's a nice stepping stone that can prove, again, Lake Placid is a player in the field of Winter Olympic type sports. By 2023, all this investment that's come in from Albany the last couple of years will be completed and in place. And so that will be, I think, a pretty good litmus test.
They'll have, as Sandy said, they'll have the facilities up in prime condition, and that's got to impress the IOC.
Sandy, you called the hockey
Right.
games and you called the Miracle on Ice game. Did you look at that American team and think they have a shot, they have a chance?
You know, going into that, we thought they had a chance, but things would have to break right. You know, the Russians, a week before the Olympics, played the Americans in Madison Square Garden and beat them 10-3. So they came into Lake Placid thinking, you know, who are these kids gonna, they're gonna take us on? And so there was a big sense of overconfidence. And the Americans, spurred by this terrific home crowd, and their coach, Herb Brooks, was just a genius. With X's and O's, he was a genius, and appealing to them here and appealing to them here. And so with the perfect storm, we figured, they can make a game of it. Nobody was going to say, put your money on the U.S. team, mortgage the house on it. Nobody's going to say that. But with everything breaking right, yes, it could happen. And Jim Craig, the goaltender, had the game of his life.
And you were kind enough to bring along some clips from that night. The Olympic Center, Lake Placid. Let's listen to that.
Still in the zone, picked up by Rusioni, cuts in, shoots, goal! Look at the goal! They're going wild! Mike Rusioni, and the United States leads it 4-3! It's over! It's over! The U.S., they thought it was impossible! The United States has upset the Soviet Union! I can't believe it! This is a miracle! I can't believe it!
How often do you go back and listen to that?
I was
that
listening
game?
on the drive up.
Were you?
I was listening to the end of the gold medal game against Finland. Yeah. You never get tired of it. You can't ever get tired of it, especially if you live in Lake Placid, spend as much of my life in Lake Placid as I have. That can never, ever go away. It's the fabric of the community. It's the greatest sports achievement in history when you get right down to it.
To this day, you get goosebumps when you
Absolutely.
listen to that 40 years
You
later.
never get old.
And
you never get tired of watching it.
And of course, we heard Al Michaels on
Yeah.
ABC
Right.
worldwide.
Yeah.
Do you believe in miracles?
Sure.
Yes. You said much the same thing about it being a miracle, and it truly was.
It was. So we were on the kind of the same page, I think, but and it was exactly that.
So for both of you, your most cherished memory, the Miracle on Ice
Yeah, it
game,
would have to
calling
be,
that,
sure.
calling that moment in
Yeah,
history.
yeah, that was. That was emotional for me because I was a relatively young guy at the time, and I realized that no matter where my career would go, no matter what I would end up doing, that was going to be the most significant event I got to call. World Series, Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, wouldn't matter. This was it. And there'd be nothing that would ever supersede that.
And Jack, you talked about
There was a war going on at that time, and it got transferred to Lake Placid, and that were the hopes of the country at that time. So the emotion that came from the war and prisoners being taken hostage, so the emotion of the U.S. fighting back came through loud and clear.
Yeah, and also
USA, USA, USA.
So at that moment, America needed something to cheer for,
yes, this was
to
it.
celebrate, and
This was it.